Hello, and welcome to the No Wrong Notes podcast, a show hosted by me, Veronica Kokis, holistic voice teacher and singer just like you. Grab a cup of tea, relax, and sit back as we discuss all things singing technique, mindset tips, and more so you can show up as the most confident and creative singer you can be. Hey, y'all, and welcome to another episode of No Wrong Notes. I have quite the treat for you guys today. I sat down and chatted with fellow voice teacher Jenna Barbieri to chat about cross training in different styles. As someone who teaches and sings jazz, pop, rock, classical, she really does it all. Training in different styles is something that Jenna really specializes in and that she really incorporates into lessons with her students. So we chat in this episode about why cross-training can be so beneficial to singers. We also chat about impostor syndrome, and just there's so much good info in this episode, and I'm really excited for you guys to listen. Just a little bit about Jenna before we dive into the episode. Jenna Barbieri is a mezzo-soprano, teacher, and arranger living in the DC metro area. She is a crossover performer that takes pride in exploring all that music has to offer. She has 2 bachelor's degrees from the University of Maryland, College Park in vocal performance and in music education, as well as a master's degree in vocal performance from NYU Steinhardt. She is the CEO and voice teacher in charge of Your Dynamic Voice Studio. And what is really cool is that she actually just released a course this spring all about training in different styles called the Cross Genre Singing Blueprint. So you can check out more of that in the show description. I've got all of that info below. And in the meantime, sit back and check out this episode, this interview with Jenna Barbieri. So today we have Miss Jenna Barbieri, another voice teacher who's going to be talking about cross training. First of all, thank you so much for coming on to chat with me today. I'm so glad to have you here and meet you and talk about these things. So thank you for joining me today to chat.
Yay, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
Yes. So let's go ahead and dive right into things here. Can you tell the listeners, who you are, what you do, and how did you get to where you are today in your career as a singer and a voice teacher?
Awesome, sure. So my name is Jenna, and I am known to sing all of the things, and I love to sing all of the things. I started mainly with jazz. My dad is a jazz trombone player and a music teacher. So that's kind of where I got that from.
Wow, that's
So
really cool.
yeah, my mom was a singer as well. They have a very cute love story. They met on a cruise ship doing like a contract.
Wow.
So cute. So I grew up with a lot of jazz around the house and I always really loved it. So like all through middle school, everyone's listening to like Jason Derulo on the radio and I'm listening to Ella Fitzgerald like on repeat. And I was like, why does no one else think this is cool? Like this is so cool. So then I was like, okay, I at first I was like, oh, I don't want to be a singer ever. I think I had a weird phase, like I watched too much TV and I was like, I don't want to be like my mom. Ew. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna play saxophone. So I played saxophone in jazz band and I literally switched classes away from all my friends in middle school just so I could be in band. Um,
Wow.
yeah, crazy. So I did that, and then I had decided randomly to audition for the musical at school. Didn't make it in. And then the next year I tried again. I didn't tell my parents. And then I got like a pretty, like I got a role. It wasn't a lead role, but I definitely had like a solo. And my mom was like, what the heck? I didn't even know you wanted to sing. And I was like, I don't know, this was fun. So I did some school theater and I was like, oh, I like this. This is really fun. So then I was like, okay, because I'm from New York City. So my next step was going to high school. And I really wanted to go to LaGuardia High School in Manhattan, also known as the Fame School, the High School of Performing Arts, all of those names. And I auditioned for saxophone and for voice. I
Oh,
actually
wow.
got in for both, which
Whoa,
is
okay.
crazy. And I ended up choosing voice, and that's that. The rest is history there. But I still pursued jazz. I did a jazz after school ensemble, like on Long Island at a totally different school. Um, and then I was doing a lot of classical music in school, and I really liked it. But I always was like looking for something else to do, or like saying like, oh, well, I like a lot of things. Like I always was very prideful of the fact that I like a lot of things, but also I think I used it a little bit as like a shield almost, like, oh, if you don't like this, well, I also do this. And I just kept kind of like getting genres under my belt. So right now I'm doing like jazz, musical theater, and classical mostly. And then I went to college. I went to University of Maryland, go Terps. And I did more classical music, and I did music education, which I loved. And I loved choir, and I still love choir. And then I went to grad school, went to NYU, and I got into a pop rock ensemble. And I was like, oh, rock is cool. Rock's my favorite. So I started doing that. So I'm like, okay, now I'm singing all of these things. And I think the cherry on top was because, well, and I'm sure we'll get more into this as I continue to babble, but I always kind of felt out of place because of all the things I like to sing, especially, and no shade, no hate, no shade to UMD, but especially at UMD was where I kind of had those feelings. But when I got to NYU, it was very much that an environment that cultivated this cross genre work. So I like almost cried at graduation. I was like one of the only people in my class. Everyone in my class was a cross genre person at some level, but I was really the only one in my class that was like, oh, I'm not only going to take my core classical classes, I'm going to be in the jazz ensemble, I'm going to be in the rock ensemble. Like I actually went out and did all those things in like a formal setting rather than kind of just like dabbling on my own. And at graduation, I looked in the program and everyone's like texting me, like, look in the program. And I had gotten an award for my contribution to classical music. It was like just me.
Oh, wow.
Um, and I was like, oh my God, I got recognized for classical music, being the one classical musician that was in the rock ensemble and that was in the jazz ensemble. I was the only one. I was like, wow, I'm being rewarded instead of pushed aside.
Hmm.
So that was really exciting. And I think that was like the fire under my butt that I kind of needed to be like, okay, I should just continue being myself. And then the Your Dynamic Voice Studio came to be from there. That's my voice studio. And my studio has always been about a safe space because I feel like I didn't get one until mid to late 20s. And I mean, I'm still very young in the span of life, but I've been doing singing since I was like 4. So it feels like quite a long time before you get to feel secure or
Yeah.
supported to have to wait that long. So I want to minimize that wait for all of my students and kind of just explore sounds in general and how we can apply that
I
to
love
whatever they want
that.
to do.
Yeah, I love that. And that's I think you and I are kind of similar in that, and that's why I feel like we connect on this level because I felt kind of similarly in that I didn't feel like I had a very safe and comfortable space to kind of cultivate my voice. But, when it comes to like my own teaching, I really hope to kind of create that space for others. So I really appreciate and admire that you offer that for your own students too. I think that's really wonderful. And I feel like we need more teachers out there that, kind of create those spaces for students. And you mentioned obviously cross training or working in different genres. Can you explain why it might be useful for a singer to cross train in different styles?
Sure. So the one very obvious reason is just to let yourself explore and to not push down any interest that you have. So I mean, there are a ton of singers that have a little bit more tunnel vision than me, and you pick one or two things that they're good at, and that's totally fine. There is nothing wrong with doing that. But most people, I'd say everybody, if you look at their Spotify or Apple Music or anything like that, it's usually not all one thing. People like a lot of different things. And I think embracing all of those parts of you is very important. So that's like my number one reason. But then aside from that, if you decide, okay, I'm going to explore all these things. Oh, that doesn't really feel good. Oh, I don't really like that one. Oh, I just don't like listening to that. Or, oh, I love this. Doing that exploration is really important. And if you come to find that you are like, cool, I only sing folk music, that's my thing, then yes, amazing. You can still learn things to apply to said folk music through other things. And especially because everyone's learning style is different. So you may hear one statement or one thing used in a certain genre, a certain setting that just clicks for you, and then you can easily apply that. So my example for that is sort of hilarious, especially if you're a classical singer. This is probably very funny. I was in a lesson literally like 2 weeks ago, and I'm a mezzo soprano, so I was singing Una voce poco fa from Barber of Seville, and there is a high B in that song, and I am pretty inconsistent when it gets above the staff like that. So I was trying to figure it out, and I was telling my teacher, like, why is it when I sing above the staff in pop, it feels so easy? And he's like, why don't you just do that right now? So I was like, okay, I'm working on Stone Cold by Demi Lovato. And anyone who knows that song, she goes up to a high A on like what feels like a full belt. And I just, I just did it. Like it was nothing. And he was like, great, just do that. And I don't know what the heck happened, but I was just like, oh. And then I put it in the bel canto, and then it worked. And he's like, only you would need to unlock your high B flat and your bel canto with some Demi Lovato belting. And I was like,
Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
seems to be. So even though for me, like that's something I would love to do is like perform Demi Lovato and Rossini back to back. That is a very me thing to do. But even if I wasn't, and I was only a classical singer, but I had that skill, or I had explored that skill, that just unlocked that tool for me. So like kind of being unapologetic about what your body does well. And I say this all the time, like learn what you do well and then use that to learn more things about what maybe doesn't come as easy to you. So you can really do that with all sorts of genres. You could say, oh, this sound that we use when we sing rock can really come in handy because it feels so free when I do that. Okay, well then how can we put that in this style? So I really like to do that work for that. And then also just if you're planning to have a music career, it is way easier to make money if you can do more things, which
Yep,
I've
yep.
also found just from gigging. I do jazz gigs, I do choir gigs, I do church gigs, I do operas. I do all of those gigs because if I only felt comfortable doing one of those things, I would have one gig, but I have 5 gigs. So that's also
Yes.
another reason for it. Like, I mean, I love singing choir. Is church my favorite genre? Maybe not.
Oh my
Do
gosh.
I love hymns. Like, no, you won't catch me, singing the hymns outside of church. But I get a very nice, steady paycheck from church. And I know how to sing the church music because I learned how to sing it. So that's also a very enticing reason to cross train as well.
I love that. And I love that example of taking the high note in Stone Cold and applying that to Una voce poco fa. I think that is so cool. I was talking to a student, or maybe I was talking to somebody else, where I was saying that over the past couple years and learning from like people like Jeannie Levetri, and I'm in Maddie Tarbox's Head thing and learning from
Yes,
some of
I'm
those like
really
workshops.
looking into that.
It's I'm like I've been learning so much from like the workshops that they've given, and me dabbling in some of that and really exploring and strengthening my belting and things like that. I feel like in turn has helped even improve some of my classical singing. I was working
Mm-hmm.
on Willow Song this morning, and I was like, wow, my diction is so much better than it was like 4 to 6 years ago when I was working on this song. Like in the first, like when I first was working on this song, I was like, wow, just like bringing some of the diction that I had discovered and had been working on in my non-classical singing into that, I have felt like it improved it overall. And so I love that you brought up that example, because I do feel like cross training in these different styles, some of these skills really can translate really well. Though I will say that something that I hear from students who have trained mostly in the bel canto technique
Mm-hmm.
and classical style is that singing non-classical music sometimes feels like they're singing incorrectly. Like I literally had
Yes.
a new student of mine who a couple of months ago who had just started lessons with me, and she was like, it just feels like not singing almost. Like it doesn't feel much like singing as they know it. It feels much more speech like to them.
Yes.
What advice would you give to a singer like that who struggles with some of the weird sounds that you might encounter in non classical styles, or where it kind of doesn't feel like singing in the way that
Yes.
they've been taught before?
Okay. So I have two thoughts, but my first one, I think, gives you that motivation to keep doing it, even though it feels weird, is that every genre has a different way of communicating its dramatic intent. So, for example, a lot of bel canto, the way in which the drama is communicated is through the phrasing of the line, through the beauty of the line, through the pureness of the vowels. So it's gonna feel very singy, for lack of a better word, or use that as the technical term, very singy. But if with something like pop or rock, the way in which the drama is conveyed a lot of times is with these like very primal human sounds, like crying and yelling and screaming and speaking and all of that. That is the way the drama is carried. So if you can truly just say, okay, my goal is always to communicate, which I learned this in high school and I've taken this with me ever since, is that we are communicators. That is our job. We are communicators. So if we know exactly how the genre best communicates, we can kind of fully commit to it with hopefully not as much self-judgment or worry about it being correct. Um, because, for example, we might a weeping sound in classical music in bel canto might sound like a line that lilts. So it still has that beautiful line to it, but it might be like 2/8 notes that lilt, and you put a lot of emphasis on the first one. Whereas a crying sound in pop might literally sound like crying. And that's where we get those like big, like in Stone Cold, that big high note. It really does sound like she's crying or like wailing. And if we can take it back to that, it makes so much sense.
Yes, yes.
So that's my big thing with that. Even with like jazz, the thing is like about being like an instrument. So what instrument conveys what emotion? Let's be that instrument. So every single genre has its little unique way of communicating. And then if we can put that in our instruments, it makes it so much easier to like embrace the weirdness or lack of singing or like whatever we think it is, because it's just a new thing. It's just not the same way of communicating. It's like learning a different language almost.
Yes, I love that idea of approaching it from the idea of like how do you communicate in this style? Like what is the approach that we can take from that place? Because I feel like most of us will just tell students like, well, yeah, you're going to make weird sounds, like just embrace the weird sounds, but I think having like a reason behind it, is
Yes.
kind of what helps you feel comfortable making those weird sounds. Because I think like when it comes to me singing pop music versus me singing classical music, where classical music, especially in that bel canto style, is all about the line and the
Mm-hmm.
connectivity between each note. And I think you can take some of that into non-classical styles too, but it's like sometimes when I'm singing like a pop song, for example, sometimes there isn't as much of that line going on, right? It's more about there being space in between each word or like having it sound more speech like in that sort of sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I love it. I love thinking about this from like the genre you're working in and like how does this genre communicate meaning and emotion. So I really love that. And I noticed, and kind of moving on to a different topic here, I noticed that you cover imposter syndrome in your cross training course, the cross genre singing blueprint. How has imposter syndrome shown up for you as a singer, and how have you worked through that?
Oh my God, where hasn't it shown up is the real question, right? Um, I have so much imposter syndrome. I've had so much imposter syndrome. I probably still have imposter syndrome. I've gotten a lot better with it, but it is so prevalent. So just know if you're listening and you're like, "Ooh, I have a lot of that." It's okay. Everybody's got it, even if it looks like they don't. Um, so my main reason for having imposter syndrome was because of how much I liked all these different genres, and it just feels like I think it's changing a lot, but it still does feel like people are rewarded for, picking one and then going full force into it. And time again, I will get comments from mentors or superiors, teachers urging me to choose one. I was in a jazz camp. Yes, I went to jazz camp. I was at a jazz camp and everybody knew I was a classical singer. Like I was majoring in classical music because all those people were majoring in jazz. Like they were just like eating it up. Like, oh, I'm just continuing to educate myself. So instead of all the classical singers who would do like the yaps and like go to Italy and sing opera over the summer, I was like, well, I'm going to use this time since I don't do jazz during school to do jazz. So while all the jazz majors are at their jazz camp, I'm in the jazz camp, like, hello. I sing Rossini. and and they were like, you're gonna have to pick one if you're really thinking about having a career in this. And I was like, oh, well, I'm not majoring in jazz, so I guess I'm not gonna pick it. Like I guess I should just not. And then it felt like, oh, then why am I here? And then I felt like, oh, everybody else knows more about improvisation. They take all these jazz theory classes and they're doing all of these things. And like I just don't have the same technique as them. I learned so much classical technique. I have no idea how to make my voice do that thing. And you have that voice in your head telling you all of this stuff. So then instead of coming at it from a place of abundance where I'm like, oh, I can't wait to learn more. I'm excited about learning more. I know this much and I can't wait to add to that. It was very much from a defensive place of like, I'm a classical singer, so like, whatever. It's fine. But then I would be in the classical setting and I'd do the same thing, but just with the jazz. Cause I was like, oh, well, I was at jazz camp this summer. So like I sing jazz and I would always like try to sing jazz during studio class or like try to sing jazz on a recital. And it would always be like, oh, that's quirky and weird. And like, why are you doing that? Um, and then I was in an a cappella group in college. which they're at ICCA finals this year. If any of
Oh,
y'all
wow.
are into
Okay,
that, to
okay.
Cadence, go to Cadence. Uh, but anyway, I was in an a cappella group in college, so I was also like doing a lot of pop music. So my teacher would be like, are you doing this correctly? You know, you're lucky. Other teachers wouldn't let you do this at all. And I was like belting my face off, and I felt really good about it. And then when I would get tired, I'd be like, well, I'm just a classical singer. And I would just like fall back on it. It was like I was doing it to myself because the environment was doing it to me. So I wanted to like preemptively protect myself. So I was using it as like both a scapegoat and also an excuse. Like it's an excuse, it's a scapegoat, and it was also like how everyone was perceiving me all at the same time. So it felt like one, I needed the secure environment to kind of break out of that negative cycle. Because then I started to embrace that I like to do all these things. And then I started to explore it. And then the mindset shifted from how can I learn more to, oh, well, I just do the other thing. So like whatever.
Mm.
And that's when it started to click. I was like, no, I professionally sing jazz, classical, pop, rock, and musical theater. And I do them all. And I've done them in school in a scholastic setting, and I've gotten paid to do them.
Yeah.
And then once I realized that, I was like, oh, let me just keep doing that. And I was like, this is so me. Like this was me all along. I should have just embraced this. But and then you do those shouldas to yourself. But it's like the environment was not a place for that to happen. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a mixture of both of those things. You have to start with a safe place, which is why I believe in that so much. So a lot of the course, the imposter syndrome talk in the course centers around practicing ownership. And this is both ownership of the knowledge you learn and saying the words, I am this, I am that. So the example I give is in grad school, we all had to take an acting class, which I'm so grateful for. It's like so not heard of in classical singing for you to take an acting class. Like they all have that acting through
Oh,
song
yeah.
class.
Yeah.
But this was like plays. Like we didn't sing.
Mm-hmm.
We did plays, movies, TV. And all the musical theater people in the class, like 2 weeks in, were saying things along the lines of, I am an actor. They were using that sentence. I'm an actor, I'm an actor, I'm an actor. And you'll hear that all, like if you are a musical theater person or you are friends with musical theater people, they all call themselves actors. And I felt so uncomfortable with that. I was like, I am not an actor. I don't act. I'm learning how to act, but I can't. And I felt like my growth was stifled. Like all the people that said they were actors, their growth was like tenfold to mine. And we were learning the same info. We were at the same level. We're all in the same class. It's not like they had some secret sauce that I didn't have. It was literally like they said they were actors and I said, no, I'm not. And that's how the
Wow.
class went the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I really encourage people, like, if you're learning classical music, you are singing classical music, you're a classical singer. If you're learning pop music, you're singing pop music, you're a pop singer. And the more you can say that over and over again, the more you'll get into that positive spin
Yeah.
versus the negative, no, I'm not this, I'm this. I'm not that, I'm this.
And I like that that kind of allows for the space to embrace like multiple aspects of yourself, because it's like we're
Exactly.
not just one thing. We're not just a singer. We're also, a partner or a, you know, member of our community. We're not just one thing. And I think that
Exactly.
should apply to singing as well. It's like we don't just
Mm-hmm.
have to be a classical singer. We are a classical singer and we can also be a pop singer, a jazz singer. We can do all these different things. So I really love that. That's awesome. Sorry, you were saying about you were talking more about this process, so I'm gonna let you
Oh,
take
yes,
over
yes.
that.
So, and then owning the information is the other thing, which is the idea that you learn something, you apply it, And then once you've learned it, it's now your information to a point where you could say the information as if you knew it already. I feel like that is so hard for people, especially if you grew up doing the classical track. It was like the entire time I felt like I had to be so hyper reliant on my teacher, and never once was I given that okay of like, you are a professional singer, you know what you're doing. It was very much like I was done, I graduated school and I was like, I need to go to grad school, I need more school, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And then almost until the very end of grad school, I was like, am I gonna have to go for an artist diploma? Like, I still don't know what's going on. And then I realized it was like, no, you totally know what's going on. Like, you don't have to be a perfect finished product to know something.
Yes. Yes.
So the more that you can take the information, so the idea is like, you're gonna learn 5 different genres in this course, but you have to learn the information and then say that it's yours, or apply it, or tell somebody else the information in a way that is like, oh, I just learned this thing and this is what it is, and I'm going to explain it to you. And that very much gives you like, you learn by teaching kind of a thing. Like, it's now your information. So I am a pop singer and this is my information to back it
Yeah.
up, kind of a thing. Once we can do that, then again, that positive cycle just kind of continues to grow.
Yes. Yes, I love that. So, like, basically creating or finding a safe kind of environment to kind of integrate this. So, it's like finding that safe space, owning these different identities and parts of yourself, and then owning that information that you're being taught, right? Saying, like, yeah, I am a pop singer, I'm a jazz singer, I'm a classical singer, and I know this information, I have this information, and I'm owning it and I'm putting it into practice, right?
Yes.
Um, and I think that that really helps build confidence and kind of moving away from that kind of feeling like, maybe I don't know what I'm doing, or maybe I'm not enough, to a feeling of like, no, I know this and I'm rocking it, right? Yeah, I think it's so
Yes.
important, and I'm really glad that you are incorporating that in your course. I think that that's super super important.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll kind of get to my next question in a second. And I think it's like kind of backing up a little bit to how you were saying earlier, like I'm not just this classical singer. I sing in all of these different genres and these different styles, and I'm able to like make a living as a singer. And I think like these skills that you're kind of teaching through this course are, more necessary than ever, because it's like we're in this space where singers are, I think, especially, I mean, I've seen it a lot in the classical space where singers are kind of having an identity crisis because they're like, I can't make enough money to just sing in this style. Like, what else can I do? And it's like, on one hand, it's good to, find other ways to make money outside of your art. You don't just need to
Mm-hmm.
put all that pressure on your art, but at the same time, it can be really useful to have these different skills and knowing how to move between genres, so that you can like kind of create your own path as an artist. And I think that it's really cool that you're teaching these skills in this course. I think that's so awesome. And I really do love that you share a lot of your singing online. What would you say to a singer that struggles with anxiety when it comes to sharing their music, specifically on social media, since the audience that is listening to you is so much larger than in a traditional performance setting?
Mm-hmm. It's a really good question, really good topic to bring up. I feel like aside from the normal, like, how do you belt? How do you mix? All that, performance anxiety is like the number one thing that I talk about in all of my lessons. So part of me wants to make a whole course about that, because I'm like, everybody struggles with this to some
Yes.
extent. Even if you're the most confident person, there's going to be a situation where you feel like this. Um, so I have very practical ways to kind of address anxiety in general, performance anxiety, but I think in terms of social media and posting videos, um, I find one that when you go very viral, which I think I maybe one time one of my videos went viral, and luckily I don't really have any like hate comments or anything because it was about belt. Like it was like a video, a teaching video. Um, but unless you're in that space where you're getting like trolls and stuff that are like hate messaging or whatever, and then you just have to kind of turn your brain off and not read those things. But unless you're in that scenario, everyone wants you to succeed. That is the thing. Most people that are watching both live and on their phones will either, especially if they're on their phones, they'll either scroll, or if they sit there and watch and actually watch, they want you to succeed. So thinking of it as this like positive support. Like if you look at it and there's 500 views on it, imagine 500 people in the room like positively cheering for you. Like that is the sort of thing I like to put in my head, is like all these people that are watching and liking it and commenting are just rooting for me. And if they aren't, like if there's hate in the comments, then either delete it or don't read it, or it's way easier said than done, obviously, but in most scenarios that really does not happen. And the other thing is being your most authentic self. Like there are all those videos of people, like the very viral singers that have like extremely edited audio, and like I'm all for edited audio. Like I'm not like a hater of edited audio because I love like electronic music. I love producing. That's like a little hobby that I like to do sometimes. So no hate to that. But it's very similar to like celebrities that get Botox or like edit their pictures and then they don't say that they do, and then they just make you feel bad, like why don't I look like that? Feels very similar when there's that like heavily
Yes.
edited singing, and then you watch it. And I'm victim of this. Like I'll watch somebody else sing and I'm like, I'm a professional singer and I feel like I'm not this good, like, or like this, I'm comparing myself to those singers. And that again is like, it's just like a negative feedback loop. Like just knowing, well, I didn't put in the work to go and edit it or get a producer and edit it. So that's my first thing. So I've been encouraging myself to post the video with the mistake in it, or post the video that's very me, like as me as possible, because I find people like that more than something like robotic and perfect. And then in terms of actually dealing with the anxiety of it, one, if it truly doesn't feel good, just don't post it. Like just do what you want, you know?
Yeah.
But two, my my therapist, when we talk about anxiety, she's always like, okay, just let yourself for a minute. We're not going to spiral, but let yourself go to the worst possible scenario. And then just keep asking yourself the question of like, okay, then what happens if that happens? What happens if that happens? And you'll find, especially with something like posting a video or performing on stage, because these aren't like truly life or death situations like a surgery or like a, jumping off out of a plane. I don't know, stuff like that, where there's like this risk of like, what if something goes wrong and you die, since that will never be the case, no matter how many questions you ask yourself, like, what happens if that happens? What happens if that happens? You can kind of find comfort in the fact that it's going to be very and unlikely that your worst case scenario does happen. But if it does, what is truly the consequence there? And it might be something like with a video posting, it might be that somebody gives it a thumbs down. And then what happens if that happens? And it's like, okay, I got a thumbs down. That feels really bad. Um, and then you wake up the next day and you're like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm still doing it. Like there's really not a scenario where it truly feels as bad, or it truly is as bad as it feels inside.
Yes.
So I try to just tell myself that whenever I have to do anything that's scary and not life threatening. Like, okay, well, what if it does? And then I always like to just tell my students my stories of all the times that I messed up and all the times that something that I thought was going to happen happened.
Uh-huh.
And it's always really funny and everyone laughs at me. And I'm like, see, like I'm a professional singer and I have gigs. And that instance did not hinder anything that happened afterwards, except my prog was so upset about it for so long. But it wasn't like, oh, I made this huge error in front of all of these important people and then I didn't ever get a job again. Like that never happened.
Yeah. Yeah, I
It's a
love
lot of
that. That
stuff, a
is
lot of
yes.
stuff.
No, I love that. I love that. And I think like you brought up a really interesting point about comparing edited vocals and audio to like celebrities that kind of like face tune their pictures. I know the Kardashians are like infamous for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding that this isn't this isn't real. I mean it is real. It's like it is their singing, but it's like it wouldn't sound like this in real life. And I think that just posting the imperfect vocals anyway, it's like it's much more real and more authentic, I think, to the listener
Mm-hmm.
to kind of hear some of those imperfections. I would rather hear
Yes.
something that, has some of that kind of authentic quality to it, even if it isn't like,
Yeah.
entirely polished,
I mean,
so
it goes back to the communication thing. Like if it's that
yeah.
perfect, it totally lacks the like intention of why it's there.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Like I want to hear the sounds that the genre makes to communicate. I don't want
Yes,
those things
yes.
erased.
Yes, exactly. Well, this has been like such a fun conversation. I do have a few more questions. These are
Okay.
fun, rapid fire
Okay, let's
questions that we're
do
gonna
it.
go through. So my first rapid fire question is coffee or tea?
Oh no, not rapid fire. Um, oh my God. I guess okay, I'm gonna say coffee.
What
Oh
is
God.
your coffee order like, or how do you prefer your coffee? Do you prefer a
Um,
latte or?
I love a latte. I love a latte. I actually really do like hot coffee. I feel like everyone's an iced coffee girly, and I like iced coffee when it's hot out,
Yes.
but I start my every morning with the hot coffee.
Nice. I love that. What is your favorite genre to sing?
Oh no. I think right now rock has really been my favorite. It's so emotional. I love it.
Cool. What are the songs that you're currently working on?
I'm still trying to figure what the heck Una Voce Poco Fa is. Still trying. It's been like 2 years. And Stone Cold. And then I have a bunch of jazz standards I'm doing on a gig. So I've been doing
Yay!
a lot of those.
Awesome. What is a song that you've had on repeat that you're listening to?
I know exactly what it is, but I can't think of the name. It's by Brass Tracks. Do you know Brass Tracks?
I do not know
Oh
Brass
my
Tracks.
God.
I probably should, but
Everybody, everybody go listen to Brass Tracks. They are so
cool.
cool. It's called Smokescreen by Brass
Oh,
Tracks. They
okay.
are like a funky, jazzy brass and vocals and hip hop. And like they do like every genre all at the same time. And I love it.
That sounds really fun.
Super fun.
Awesome. What is the last book you read that you would recommend?
Um, oh my God, it's Glennon Doyle's book.
Untamed?
Untamed, 100%. And then listen to every podcast episode
Oh, I love her
after.
podcast.
Oh my God,
Yes, so
obsessed.
good. What is the TV show you last binged or are currently binging?
Nathan for you.
Nathan for you. I love that. Okay, I'm only dying because I feel like I don't know a lot of people that watch that show, and like I think he is
It's
hilarious.
so funny.
That's
Have you
like
seen the rehearsal?
yes, yes, love the rehearsal. That was
We watched the
insane.
rehearsal first. So now we're like, okay, we got to
Oh,
watch Nathan for you. So we've been watching them.
Nathan for you is so funny. I love that. What is the best place you've traveled to?
Hmm. I guess the best place, and I'm actually really lucky because it was when I was 10 years old. I went to France, and I'm going back like 2 weeks
Oh,
from now.
nice!
Yeah,
Yay!
we're going to Portugal and France in 2 weeks. So I feel like that's going to be my answer.
Oh, that is so exciting. That is really,
So I'm
really
very
cool.
excited.
Yay!
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the pod and chatting with me about all things cross training, cross singing, and different styles. This was so fun, and I'm glad we got to do
Oh
it
my God.
today.
Thank you so much. This is so much fun.
Yay! All right, guys, that is it for this week's episode of No Wrong Notes. I hope that you enjoyed this interview with Jenna. I had so much fun sitting down and chatting with her. And I hope that you got some useful tips and information out of this episode. You can find out more about Jenna and her course at the link below. And until next time, happy singing, y'all.